Okay, hello and welcome everybody. We have people still trickling in, but I think we'll get started. Thanks for joining us again for another webinar. Ben Munson with FarmQA here. I'm a senior technology specialist with the company. And today we're going to talk through how you can streamline your application work order processes with FarmQA. So where I'd start with this is just saying we've got a handful of customers using us to do spray work orders. And it uses a combination of existing features in FarmQA plus a new feature on the spray record side. And so with that, we've had a handful of questions and good conversations about how to kind of maximize the value of FarmQA to do spray records. And so we thought we'd put together this webinar to walk people through the setup side along with the optional outputs that we can generate for work orders specifically. So with that, we'll cover how you set up applicators, chem applicators in your system, how you can create the spray orders that I just mentioned in our system, and then the reporting or the kind of the record keeping side. So we have some very detailed reports along with some more consolidated options depending on if it's for internal reporting or if it's to the extent of getting audited on what's been sprayed across your operation. So our intention is to cover all that in this webinar. And as far as a housekeeping thing, we are using Microsoft Teams, so feel free to ask questions in the chat, and I will answer those at the end of the presentation. So with that, I'm going to jump into a live demo and walk you through how you can do spray work orders. So a couple things here. I'm going to start out in the web view. And to start with, we're going to just talk through a couple setup type things to make sure your account is configured and ready to go to do spray work orders. And so with this, as I look at the web view, I'm going to start by creating a user, which I'm going to consider to be a chemical applicator. Now, to start with, we support a scenario where maybe you are a large farm and you employ your applicators yourselves, and they could be in as a user. But our intention is also to, if this is an external user, maybe you're an agronomist and you're working with an external applicator, they can also have a login and you can restrict what access they should have or to what farms. And so we'll showcase what that looks like. And so, for example, bottom left, I'm going to click and add a user. And so within here, as I do that, I can add an email. So we do require the email. So I could say applicator@farmqa.com. And we're going to say this is webinar example is a username and FarmQA is a password. So now as I set up this user, I can choose from these permissions or roles. And so in the case of an applicator, a good kind of default is to set them up as a driver. And so you can see here they can view field data and they can complete spray recommendations. So that would be kind of a good option. And again, it's a restricted access, meaning they're just receiving work orders from whoever is managing or dispatching the chem application side of the business. And then they can view it, they can complete it, move on. If you want to grant somebody maybe additional access and you are the grower, you could elevate somebody, if you're doing your own spray records, to the grower role. So in my case, I'm going to say just the driver. And I just mentioned how we can just grant access for this applicator to a subfolder within your operation. So perhaps this applicator should only have access to North Dakota farms. So I can do that, and if I have subfolders underneath ND Farms, which I do, I'm going to say apply permissions to all levels below. So as I save that out, I now have this new user. This webinar example is an actual user, a login in my account. And now from here, we can set them up as a true applicator in FarmQA. And so what I mean by that is over in the Advice tab on the left, I can now see this Applicator tab, which is a new feature in our software. And if I click on that, I can create applicators. I'm going to create two examples. One is going to be a user who is not in existing, does not have an existing login in FarmQA. So I could set up, for example, we'll say webinar 2 is this user. We ask for a license number. So this is going to basically be your state approved applicator license number. And then your license authority, this is an optional box, but you could say this is my Minnesota license or pesticide application license. And then this is where it's optional. You can say, I'm going to assign this to a user or not. So in this case, I'm going to say this is an applicator, but they do not actually have a login within FarmQA. Secondarily, I'm going to say webinar 1 in this case, license number. We'll say this is a North Dakota authority, but this time I am going to assign it to that login I created called webinar example. So what that does, that actually associates it with somebody who can log in and complete those work orders, whereas the webinar 2 is not associated to an actual login. And so then with that, as the manager, as you complete recommendations, you can say webinar 2 sprayed this field, even though the webinar 2 applicator didn't mark it as complete in the software. So it's somebody else doing it on their behalf is a better way to think of that. So regardless, we've got the accounts configured, the applicators are set up. And then with this, we can kind of talk through how a couple of different scenarios. The first scenario I'm going to talk through is the situation where there's an agronomist, an applicator, and a grower who are all involved in the production process. And so the reason I'm calling that out separately is that involves a recommendation and dispatching out a recommendation. Whereas the second flow I'm going to talk through is just jumping straight to a spray record. And that's more of a scenario where you may be a grower directly and saying, I just want to have a better record keeping tool for when I spray and if there's any sort of audits that happen. So again, the agronomist side would be the following. So I am the agronomist at this moment, and we'll say I'm going to write a recommendation. And so with that, I've got a list of my fields, and this may be review for a handful of you, but I'm going to say I'm going to write recommendations on a handful of my soybean fields. So I grab, let's say I've got 7 fields here, and I'm going to choose my mixes. So in this case, I'll grab one at random and say this is my mix I'm going to apply on all 7 of the soybean fields. At this point, you can set a start and stop time, and this is just more kind of a suggested application window. So let's just say today through Saturday, and I can add that. And so what this is going to do is it adds that recommendation in to my account. And so now we have access to that recommendation, and you can see that in my list view of all my recommendations sorted by date in this case. So as I see these here, I've got these are guys broken up by organization. So these 2 got split out and are specific to Minnesota farms, and the next one got split out and is specific to North Dakota farms. And the reason I'm calling that out is as I write or create a work order based on these recommendations, I can only assign them to people who have permission to that folder. So that's why we sliced out that recommendation accordingly. So within this view, what I can do is I can see all the fields, I can see the products, the rates, the totals. But now, again, the scenario is I want to dispatch this out. So I can create an application task. And actually, as a quick pause here, where you see application task, this is where the work order side comes in. So if you don't see the option over here for task create applicators, that would be because you don't have the task feature turned on in your FarmQA account. So contact support@farmqa.com and we can get that set up for you. But within there, you can see you can create task types, and that's where I have broken down into an aerial application category, and I can create others. So let's say I want to come in here and create let's just say a ground application. I've already got one of those, so I'll say 2. And then you can assign the task category to an apply task, meaning that it can be assigned to a recommendation. And then you can choose your icon. So let's say I just grab maybe a truck icon in this case and save that out. So now that's its own task category, which I can use. And again, I'd say the practical use case here is you create one category for every type of application you do. So aerial application, ground application, in my case, well, it would be two separate options. And then I set up fertility as well. And that's the value of categorizing those is just for the purpose of being able to quickly filter down to say, just show me my fertility applications or just showing my aerial applications after the fact. Okay, so now back into where I was looking at a recommendation, and at this point I can see my application task over here. And so if I create that or click to create the task itself, this is where I can choose to say, are we going to create a work order for all these fields or just a select subset of the fields? In my case, I am going to do them all. And now these dates, the start and finish by dates, are going to pertain to the actual work order. So let's say we want to get this done by Friday. We want to do it on Friday. I can set priority, and this is an optional pick list. It defaults to medium, but I could say I want to change that to high. And now this is where I can assign this to an applicator. And in my case, I'm just looking at North Dakota Farms, which just has that webinar example applicator. Whereas if you remember, that webinar example 1 user is not in this list because that had access in the Minnesota farm, or the other half of my account. So point there just being, we do restrict this list down to that proper access level. So now once I could add instructions to say spray fields west to east. And now when I save this out, it now simultaneously creates independent tasks for all 7 of those fields. And so you can see it over here. It creates those tasks, and you can see who they're assigned to. You can edit those. You can mark them as complete from this view. So what I would say at this point, so that's again, agronomist, maybe writing the rec, maybe a farm manager pulls up the recommendation and goes through that process, which I just showed here, of assigning the recommendation to those fields. Now we're going to go to that third step of being the applicator and seeing what that view looks like. So to do that, I'm going to jump over to the mobile app, as that's probably a more practical use case of how you might go about doing your applications. One thing I would call out here is that from the map view, we added in this feature, if I slide out the main map details, where I can color my map. By default, people are used to seeing the color by crops, and you can see that color coding and the correspondence there. But I can also color this by task. And the reason I call this out now is that if I color by task and color specifically by chemical application, I now can see all the fields that are kind of outstanding or need to be applied, so are ready to be applied. And so with that, I've got currently viewing my no task and ready tasks. One trick within this view is that you can also just show the ready tasks. So right now, all 4 of the tasks are being displayed, but I could say just show me the ones that are ready. So now as an applicator, it's more of a better way or easier way to plan a route, to say I'm going to come through and maybe go north to southeast and catch all 3 of these fields in one trip. So that's just a nice access view, color-coded view from the map view to do that. The other option is from the work tab. So this is where I'd say maybe a majority of the work may be done, is just to view a list of tasks. And before I go through the applicator scenario, like I mentioned, let's just say we're still the agronomist. I'm looking at the screen as a farm manager, as an agronomist. I can see all the tasks. And so if I want to just kind of review everything that's outstanding, I can view all the application tasks that I have in my account and see which ones are left to be done. And so at any point in time as a manager, I can just do a quick check and know what my team has left to be done. Now let's say we're going to jump over into the applicator side. So to do that, I've set up a separate login for myself here to be an applicator. And so with this, you'll notice that this account is restricted down to just North Dakota Farms. It has no access to the Minnesota Farms farm operation. And so in this, I've got, I'm going to run a quick sync. I've got some tasks that are assigned to me. And so in this case, you're going to see a list of spray work orders, which will be assigned to myself. And then that's where I can go to complete those, is from this list view. And a couple things to note about this view is that you saw me search. So if I had different task types within here, I could filter and just say, show me my application types. Yeah, I think a common scenario here with an applicator would be they just have applications listed in this view. But if not, they can filter that or search that way. They can also sort this. So a common thing might be to sort by distance, to say, show me the fields that are closest to me versus furthest away in this list view. So again, just helping the navigation process here. The other thing I would call out, so within this, if you've got multiple applicators, a way that you can manage assigning those across multiple applicators is through this daily task view. So in my case, I have a bunch of spray tasks that are set up as unassigned. And so you can see those sitting here as needing to be done today the May 9th, but I can dispatch these out to different applicators. So I could grab and drag and drop these and say, okay, ND driver 1 needs to do those 2 fields, and Ben Munson should do these. I'll put quite a few in this one. And so that's how you can distribute those unassigned work tasks out to the team. Or you can leave them unassigned, and then the applicators are more autonomous to say, as I'm done with my task or my job, I'm going to grab the next one on the board, essentially. And if that's the mechanism you prefer, then I would leave those unassigned opposed to actually assigning those to the specific applicators. So back in my account here, so if I look at the work list, I can see, I should have those application tasks here. So there's my application task. I was in the wrong growing season there. So I have to apply this field. The field's called grid sampling in my case, and it's assigned to me as high priority. And because I've sorted by distance, I can see that's 18 miles away from myself. But if I click on that task, I can now see the ID of the work order, who created it, so Ben, and that's assigned to me, Munson Ben, and then finish by date, May 10th, priority's high. From here, the common flow or scenario would be you could view the recommendation. So again, this flow is based on an agronomist being involved, pushing a rec to a farm manager to the applicator. But now me as the applicator, I pull this up, and this is essentially my work order. So I can see the details of what products I need, the rates, and the totals. And we base the totals based on your field size. So we're going to calculate that out. And then that's what I can use to load the sprayer. So I can have that available. Now, additionally, if I click on this right arrow, this will pull me into the field view. And so as I look at this field, I can see where the field entrance is in this case, that green circle. And then I can also navigate. So if I'm new to an area, I'm new to a company, I can click on the arrow, and it's going to push the coordinates for the field entrance to your default mapping provider. And now I can specifically get turn-by-turn directions to that field as I go to apply. So the idea there, no more calls back to the office saying, where's the grid sampling field? How do I get there? That's all built in or baked into the FarmQA app. Once they're there, so they can get to the field, get to the entrance, and they can apply the field. And within there, the concept that we allow is to complete this task. And so as I do that, there's a check mark to complete the task, and this will automatically prompt the user to fill out a spray record. Because this was based on a recommendation, all the products are defaulted to what the rec values were. So a common scenario here would be to click on the field, and then on this screen, this is where you can customize the details. A couple things I would call out here. You can specify a custom area. So you notice this field was 271 acres. Let's say there's a drown out in the middle and your monitor says you only did 258. You can override that and say that's what I actually sprayed. And then you can put in, so as far as wind speed and temperature and direction, we default in that data into every spray record. So you can be hands off there, say as you complete the spray record, we will stamp in the data we have for that date and time. But a lot of customers wanted to specify or more or less have an override. So turning this on as an override to our data to say it was 5 miles an hour. Then you can put start-stop times for your application. So in my case, I sprayed it today, and I'm going to set the time down here and say it's going to be 11:19 when I started and 2:18 when I finished. So now as I do this, I can save the field details. Optionally, you can adjust these to say, well, I didn't actually apply a bound, so I'm going to delete that out. And I added in maybe silencer as an insecticide. So what that allows you to do is that is saying it does not change the rec. It does not alter that. The rec is still a paper trail that exists to say what the agronomist recommended. This is just saying, here's what I actually sprayed versus what may have actually been recommended. So additionally, you can adjust the rates. So I can come in here and I can view, or I can put 1.1, and you can also view product labels. So as the applicator, if you want to look at this even before you spray, look at the PPE requirements, you can have that available from the mobile app as the applicator. So we've done that. The water volume, let's say you leave that the same. We'll pre-populate the pre-harvest intervals. Now here you have the applicator. So because it's me as the user that's completing this, it will populate as myself. If this is a scenario where it's maybe a secretary that's just completing on the behalf of the actual applicators, then you'd want to just choose from this list of possible applicators for this organization. Application method, so that you can say this is a broadcast application, and you can put any notes in here that you'd want as kind of a catch-all. So if you need for compliance something additional in here, you could say PPE was worn. Now I could submit that, and now on my task list, that's cleared out. So now I have no remaining jobs available for myself. This is where you can go into, instead of viewing just your tasks, you can filter into all tasks, which I am in this case. But if there was outstanding jobs, you could pick those up and complete those before the end of the day. So it's a way to say, again, just my task versus all tasks, and manage a team in that way. So at this point, a couple things I would mention here is completing that task would also change the color on that colored map I showed. So it would go from that gray color to green being done. And then I can also view under advice, I can view all my past recommendations and what's been completed versus what's outstanding, and then view those spray records. So as I complete that, that creates an official spray record, which I can generate a report for. I can send that out to a manager or whoever needs to see that in real time. Additionally, if a farm manager just wants to log in and see the spray record logs, they can see that here on their side from a mobile application. Now those records also get published back into the web view. So a couple things to note there is under advice. If I click on advice, I now have those recommendations that I wrote, but again, the spray record is going to be its own category, just like on the mobile side. And I can see that grid sampling field that I did, that was a broadcast application from the mobile app. And so this grid will show you all of your applications that have been completed. And you can see we've got some additional columns which you can view, or you can turn columns on and off. So if you wanted to have, let's say, you don't care about maybe variety in this case, you could turn that off along with maybe organization, and then your grid is going to adapt to that. And so this is just a quick snapshot view. If you want to look at, let's say, workload for a particular applicator, you can see that from this list, and you can sort and filter with these headers. Additionally, maybe a common flow is last 30 days. You want to filter down and just show me the most recent spray events, and then you can click on the left-hand side and view the actual details. So as I do this, you can see when it started, when it stopped. You can see the details about PHI, rainfast, REI, the application method, and then the applicator. And that's where the applicator number comes in, is we'll stamp that on the report. Note in this case, I overrode the acres to say it was 271, but I only applied 258. And then I mentioned that recommendation as a paper trail, meaning that if I click on this, it pulls me back into the rec, and you can see that I recommended a bound, but on the spray record, it was actually applied. I put the silencer in there instead of that. So you can bounce between the spray record and the rec and see that connection there. Now, additionally, a common scenario here might be it's year end and you need to do reporting, or you're in a compliance scenario. What you can do in this case is, if I grab, let's say, the whole season, last 12 months, here's all my spray records. I can grab everything and export that out into, let's say, Excel. Or what I could do is, maybe you're getting asked to say, show me all your sprays on field 115. So I can search that, hit enter, and now my list snaps down, and I've applied, in this case, 6 applications on this field over the last 12 months. And now I can select just these reports, and on the top right, this is where I can export these out. And I've got an option to go to PDF, and I've got an option to go to Excel. So I'll show both options here. So with the PDF option, something to note is that there's this report type. So there's the detailed report, and then there's a condensed report. So I'll show you both options. A condensed report in this case is going to take each of those applications and put it as a single row in a table. So this is a scenario where we looked up an EPA compliant form, and in this case you can see the applicator, the license number, completion date, the products that were included, registration number, treated area, etc. So that's the condensed view. Additionally, for maybe something more like gap compliance, you might need a more detailed report. And so what this will do is, again, 6 sprays in this case, which means we'll generate a 6-page PDF. And so each page is an application. So you can see this one was on 5/1 of this year, and you can see what was sprayed, products, registration number, amounts. Page 2, it's the same field, just a different application date. So it's a way that you can go back spray by spray and get all the details that are required out of a report. Additionally, we know there's a lot of different requirements out there for different states, different crops, different scenarios. So as a fallback, I would say you can use this Excel option. And as you export to Excel, this is going to be more or less all the details we have for that spray. So in my case, I've got a column for, this is the grower, organization, field, crop, applicator number, the completion date, application method, the applied area versus total area. And then as you get through here, you can see that the products, the EPA numbers, the rates. We will stamp in, like I mentioned, all the weather data that we have, and that will allow you to override the wind, like we mentioned, the PHI, REI, rainfast. Now, another nice or unique feature with this is you can look at the totals tab on the bottom left. And so you can see the total chemical applied in that field for the whole season. So if you, well, in this case, whatever time filter. So I did 12 months, so it's the whole season in this case. But this is just a quick roll up that you can use. And a kind of a tip here is you could use the whole season for the whole farm and look at your total products used and start thinking about planning for the next season based on those totals. So that's part of the export to Excel is getting that total list view. A couple of things I'll mention here. So we talked through, this is the flow where we start from a recommendation, farm manager to applicator. We do have customers that want to jump straight to a spray record in the sense that it's just a record keeping tool and I want to create a spray record. A couple ways to do that would be directly from the mobile app. So if I'm under this advice tab, and in this case, I don't need to use a recommendation to create the task, the work order, the spray order. I'll just jump straight into the spray records, the second tab up here. Now, if I click this plus button down at the bottom right, now this will bring me into an interface where I can grab my fields. And so let's say I'm going to grab some sugar beet fields. In my case, I can multi-select. So this may be a scenario where I'm a grower, I just sprayed 4 fields, and I want to say I did so. So choosing those fields pulls those up. You can customize the details like we said before. So let's just say you just want to put in a start and stop time. So we'll do that for this field. Go to the next one and put a start stop time, etc. Now with this, I can now, instead of pre-popping the products like before based on the rec, I now need to fill this out manually. So I can choose from my mix list. Let's see if I got any beet mixes in there. So I grab a fungicide and I say I applied this. So it's got the rates, but let's say in this case, I went to 7 ounces. Now from here, the applicator is me. The process from this here on is the same as when you completed based on a rec. But now as I submit that, I've got 4 spray work orders. And so you can see that here. And back on the web, I'd have the same spray work orders underneath this tab. And so with that, you'll notice that if I look at the list view of all of my sprays, you'll see that these 4 are not linked to recommendation. So that's what this button allows you to do is you can click on that and you can see back to the rec. Whereas if you just write spray records from quote unquote scratch, you don't have a linkage back to anything, but you still have the record of what was applied. So that is part of the flow here. And then in addition to that, that's going to be available in your event log. So I called out the field 115 before, and we had the multiple sprays on it. So if I look at this event log, we can now see the spray events. And so if I do that, I can see all my sprays. So recommendation spray. And if I wanted to report out from here, I could say, just show me my sprayed events. And now this list will filter down to just those sprays. And then I could go to a PDF from this view and get to that output. So another way, just I would call that just from the map view in the event log, and a value there is you could see that in line with your other events, your plant harvest data as well. So the other component here that we've had requests or positive feedback on is as you apply, we mentioned that you can see that map view, and I'll just mention here that you can also view that map, color-coded map, but from the web view. So let's go into my applications. So I can see what's ready to be sprayed. If I go back into prior seasons, I can see if there's anything that's you can see my completed task in blue, ready in green. You can customize the colors if you want to have different color coding methods for what's been done or what's ready to be done. But just calling out here that you can see this from the web view as well. And then what I wanted to say here is that under the work tab, so I mentioned how as a manager, how you can dispatch these sprays by dragging them through the calendar view and assigning those to the applicators. But I also wanted to mention that from the task list view, you can see all of the outstanding tasks. And a good trick here, if you're doing a lot of spray work orders and you want to look at, say, load management across applicators and who's doing what, if I click on this drop-down list, I've got a list of some pre-canned grids of tasks. And so you notice I'm dealing with scouting tasks, soil sampling tasks within this view. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a new custom view. So I click that little plus button, and I'm going to say applicator workload. I'm going to save that out. So what this will do, it creates me a new view. So now every time I come to this drop-down, I've got the applicator workload. But now what we want to do is we want to customize this grid to show the data that we care about in this scenario. So to do that, under task types, I'm going to hit filter, and I'm going to say I just care about aerial application, ground application, and fertility. So basically all my application type events. So as I do that here, oops, I didn't click filter. So as I do that, now I can hit filter, and now you can see this grid or this list snaps down to just those event types, and I'll filter that as well. Now what I can see is who it's assigned to. I can see the priority, the status. What you can do here as well is if I turn on the columns, I can turn on this resolution option. And right now this is just all the unresolved or everything that's outstanding. But what you could do is you could say, I want to just show me the completed tasks. So now this is more of a historic look back of what got done by who, when. And so from here, let's say I can clean this grid up a little bit and say, I just want let's say the finish date. There we go. The finish by date, completed by email in this case. And we will leave everything else, I think, on there. Instructions, sales, growing season. All right, so if I save that out, actually I'm going to grab the area as well. So now what we can see is, if I drag the area over, you can see who remove the assigned to as well. So now this might be a grid you want to save. So I save this out, and now we can see all the aerial applications. You can see who applied it. So I completed most of these, but you can see there's some other applicators in here as well. But now you can see the area that was applied, by who. You can see notes that were in there, or instructions and notes, and then you can export this to Excel. So if you simply want to do kind of a quick roll-up area total by applicator, you can get to a grid like this and say, okay, everything for Ben, we're just going to do a sum across the area and see, okay, well, he covered 7,300 acres across the course of a week or so. And so just a way to, as using that task management system, get the added benefit of being able to look at workload across who's completing different tasks within the system. So that's just that save grid. So now just to prove the point, if I come back into workloads, that's a quick access of saying, show me all my tasks, or saying quickly snap into applicator workload. And now that grid should rebuild to the way we had it set before as far as the status goes. I must have hit a filter wrong here. So anyway, that's the way the grid works in this case, how you can save those views out and more quickly access that. I did mention how on the task, how you can change those grid colors. I'll mention that here within the aerial application, you could say anything that's ready, we're actually going to change this from red to green and save that out. So now that would be the way that as you style the map by task category, you're going to have the colors that you care about or logical to you as you complete that. So with that, I mean, that's covering really the basics of this work order system. And the key thing I would say is the spray records tab, and then being able to report that out in however you needed that reported, whether that's the condensed PDF or to Excel, and then see the records of that. And again, the recommendation will give you a quick access view too to see what's left or outstanding. And so that's another way that you can filter this to just show me anything that's not done. And it's the concept there is just to not miss any fields that may need to get sprayed but are not designated or are not completed yet. So with that, I mean, that's covering the core content of the work order system. What I want to call out here is we're going to continue webinars. We have a new one coming up on just covering what we've built to our scouting platform that's new over the last 12 months. And so as you get into scouting season, you can get exposed to the great new features we've got. And so that's coming up. But we're going to look over to questions now and see what questions you guys have on the work order system we've built and the tasks. So with that, please put your questions into the chat of Microsoft Teams, and we'll take those now.